Name.
Connor Dowling.
Okay. What? How? Okay. Oh my God. Why? Okay. How come nobody on the left of the Democratic side would step up to challenge Hillary Clinton in the presidential election?
So Hillary Clinton right now is the lone person who has declared candidacy in the Democratic primary for president. But one thing that's important to remember is it's still pretty early in the process. And so it still might be the case that people will challenge her within the Democratic Party. That might be unlikely given the amount of support she appears to have right now, both in polls. When you ask people who they support, many people are supportive, within the Democratic Party at least, of Hillary Clinton. But also the sort of network of support she has within the party. In terms of political science research, one of the best predictors we have of who will emerge victorious from primary elections is how many endorsements they receive from party elites. And although there's not a lot of endorsements yet, sort of early indications are that she's going to get quite a few of them. And so if you're another candidate or potential candidate that's considering challenging Mrs. Clinton, then you might be concerned that you're not going to get as much funding from other sources, and that your candidacy doesn't really stand a good chance. My guess is there will be at least one or two candidates who will end up running against her. It could end up being like 2008, where one of them can sort of slide ahead of her and end up becoming the president like Barack Obama did. He kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. Hillary Clinton was sort of the favorite going into that primary in 2008. But then sort of slowly over time, things changed a little bit there. But she is much more clearly the favorite going into 2016 than she was in 2008. And so there doesn't appear to be some other candidate who might have such widespread support like Barack Obama ended up having in the Democratic ranks. There's been some calls sort of looking in different sort of op-eds and other sort of social media for Elizabeth Warren to perhaps challenge Hillary Clinton. That seems somewhat unlikely, but I guess that's a possibility. The current governor of Maryland is another possibility, but they have much larger startup costs in terms of gaining nationwide recognition within the Democratic Party, which makes their candidacy sort of less likely to win the nomination than it is for Hillary Clinton. She's got this startup advantage that other candidates do not.
Okay. Do you think that Hillary Clinton would be trustworthy enough to be president? As they say she is.
I'm not exactly sure what you might mean by trustworthy. I think all politicians face this question of trustworthiness, right? That's sort of a question that all politicians face. And for voters, what trustworthy means varies, right? So if we look at how people think about trustworthiness, for some people they focus on, do I think they're trustworthy to make difficult decisions, right? They might focus on sort of foreign policy matters. For other people, they think just trustworthy in terms of, do I think you're honest? I don't think at this stage there's any major trustworthy concerns. That obviously there was the scandal about the emails when she was Secretary of State, but that's already subsided somewhat. It'll certainly come up again once sort of campaigning gets going heavily. I'm sure it'll be brought up, but I'm not so sure that that's really a issue that's going to really resonate with voters compared to the other things that'll be talked about over the course of a campaign. So if you're referring to like that scandal in particular, in terms of trustworthiness, my guess is in the long run, it's not going to matter all that much. But larger questions of just, do I think this is the right person to make decisions? Those are the sorts of questions all candidates face, and people sort of make up their mind in different ways when it comes to that.
Okay. Now, do you think about the Congress election for Alan Nunnally? Now, what is your opinion on the election?
So, the special election to replace Alan Nunnally's seat in Congress, right? Representative Nunnally, died due to cancer. All right, and so his seat has to be filled, right? Which is unfortunate that he passed away. And so his seat has to be filled because it's not until, and then in 2016, November of 2016, another election will be held, right? So whoever wins a special election, the first thing to know is they will have to run for re-election again almost immediately, right? So next year in 2016, and so the special election is really tough to predict for a couple of reasons, but the most important reason that makes it difficult to predict is that all special elections are kind of different and quirky in their own ways. And in this case, what's a little bit quirky about it is that all the candidates are listed as independent candidates, that there will be no party labels on the ballot. And that's just how the special election works in the state of Mississippi. And so as of right now, I believe there are 13 candidates that have filed to be on the ballot. And so when people go to vote on May 12th in the 1st District of Mississippi, 1st Congressional District of Mississippi, they'll have 13 names to choose from, and next to all of them, it'll say independent candidate. Now, all these candidates have some party affiliation, it's just not going to be on the ballot. So that cue that we often use to make decisions, they're a Democrat, they're a Republican, is not going to be there. If you look at sort of the signs driving around Oxford, say, there's quite a few for different candidates, which also makes it different, that there's actually a good handful. I've seen at least 5 or 6 different campaign signs, which is different than in a general election where you usually see 1 or 2, right? Some for the Democrat and some for the Republican. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. As of right now, there's basically 12 Republicans who have declared their candidacy and will appear on the ballot, and 1 Democrat. And no matter what happens, it's unlikely that anyone will get a majority of the vote on May 12th. And so as long as if no one gets 50% of the vote, then what will happen is the 2 highest vote getters will then face off in a runoff on June 2nd. I believe I have that date right. I'm pretty sure it's June 2nd. And so whoever the top 2 vote getters will then face off in a runoff, and that will determine the winner of the person who will replace Representative Nunnally. And so it's possible that being the lone Democrat, maybe if sort of all the Democrats who want to vote are able to coordinate around this candidate, that could bump him up into the top 2 and then get him into the runoff. Or you could end up with 2 Republican candidates against each other in the runoff. But sort of the biggest thing to remember is there's going to be a lot of candidates, and so the votes are going to really be spread out across them quite a bit. And then the other thing is that all these candidates are going to be listed as independents, which sort of takes away that main cue that we know people use to make decisions, which is their partisanship. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, difficult to predict. And I guess the last thing that's to keep in mind is that turnout will be very, very low. Even though this is sort of an important thing, you're replacing your congressional representative. We know that turnout in special elections is low to begin with. And so, best guess is of all eligible people, all the people that are eligible to vote, my best guess would be somewhere between 15 to 20% will actually vote. I'd be shocked if it was anything more than 25%, but 15 to 20% is more likely, which is not a large number of people ultimately making the decision of who will be their representative. But if you're asking me who's going to win, I have no idea.
All right. Thank you very